Now, I'm sure many of you are probably thinking, my district would never let my students' information get out like that. And there are districts that are trying to assure their parents of that. And when they do so, there are some things that most districts are leaving out. You see, when your child logs on to take the park test, they are logging directly in. They're logging directly into the park database. No information is stored on your district's computer for the test. All the information goes straight to park. Park will then score the test, give that information back to the district. At that point, the district may put on a random number generated and give the information to the state. The district is doing the best it can to protect the student privacy from the state, but they have to allow Park to come right on into the classroom and take it straight from the child. There's no firewall between your child entering data and Park receiving it. And remember, according to the contract that Park signed with the United States Department of Education, they have to give access to the federal government, access to any and all data collected. Now, also within that same contract with Park was this little interesting bit of information. On page 3 of the Ohio's agreement with Park, the Memorandum of Understanding, and we have all these documents available you can look at afterwards as well. It says that we must be committed to using the assessment results in its accountability system, including teacher evaluations. So what does that mean? It means that when we signed on to Park, we agreed to use their test to evaluate our teachers. It's truly ridiculous. Now, 50% of your teachers' evaluations are based upon how kids do on a test. Now, at first, it would seem to make a little bit of sense to evaluate teachers based upon how their kids do on a test, until you really think about it. Because you realize then that teachers cannot be evaluated the same way that other professionals are. Other professionals can be evaluated based upon whether or not they're turning out a good product, or whether or not they help the profit and loss sheet be profitable at the end of the year. And that works well when you're producing widgets. But teachers aren't in the business of producing widgets. They're in the business of producing people. People who are wildly and wonderfully different. The teacher who is blessed with dyslexics in her class, who have a wonderful, albeit very different view of the world, cannot be compared to the teacher who has no dyslexics in the class. When we use tests to evaluate teachers, we will be discouraging teachers from wanting to teach those kids who might be a little hard to love, or take some extra time, or maybe they're just really bad test takers. But with Park, that's what we are required to do. Beyond the fact that tests in general aren't a good way to evaluate our teachers, the Park tests in particular are really bad to evaluate teachers. We're seeing projected failure rates of 60 to 70%. This means that 60 to 70% of your kids' teachers will be failing half of their evaluation. Why will so many kids be failing these tests? Well, first off, they're developmentally inappropriate. So we talked about some of the developmental inappropriateness when we talked about the math standards. But when we look at the ELA too, we're seeing reading passages that are 2 to 3 grades above the grade that is being tested. Dawn Haley Randall is an English teacher in the Elyria district, and she said this in December of last year. I evaluated every English language arts constructed response question I could find on the Park website. They do not show clear articulation through the grades. They are not developmentally sound for elementary children. They are not well written. I found my 5th graders were doing one passage that was rated at a much higher maturity level, cited by Park themselves. In all my 25 years of teaching, I have never found anything as developmentally inappropriate as this test. To further express this point, we have to look at the way the questions are worded. Russ Walsh is a 45-year career as a classroom teacher and reading specialist and a curriculum director in both New Jersey and Pennsylvania schools. He had this to say when he evaluated the readability of the Park test. The The other results show that the passages chosen are about 2 grade levels above the readability of the grade of the age of children being tested. English language learners and students with disabilities will be particularly hard hit because these tests will prove to be extraordinarily difficult for them. It's like the difference in asking the question, write a short essay about a person that you admire, or asking the question, in a brief composition, discuss someone who, among other various personalities that you have met in your life, strikes you as being significant and meritorious. The child may very well be able to do the task, but only if they can comprehend the question. This is why we have seen test scores in places like New York and Kentucky plummet with PARCC. Now let's take a further look at the impact of the high failure rates when we get to the graduation requirements. Now, in Ohio, we now have 3 pathways to graduation. And that actually sounds pretty good, because then, if you miss one opportunity, you have another one along the way, until you really evaluate it. The first pathway to graduation is a cumulative of 18 for your PARCC and AIR assessments or your end-of-course exams. Now, the PARCC is going to be scored on a scale of 1 to 5. With each of those 7 tests, you have to have a total of 18 points by the time you graduate in order to get a diploma. Now, it sounds easy enough because all you have to do is get a 3 or average on all of the tests, and you'll get the 18. No big deal. Well, there's a couple problems with that. The first, Pearson hasn't decided how they're going to score these tests yet, and they're not going to until August of this year, after all the tests have been taken. I have big problems with that, because this means that students and teachers have no idea what they are blindly aiming at. Not only that, but based upon how other states where they have used these tests before, and how these tests are constructed, we can predict that roughly only 30 to 40% of the students will be able to get a 3 or greater. This means that 65% of the students will not be able to get an 18 on their end-of-course exams. That's okay though, because we have a second option. The second option is a remediation-free score on your ACT or SAT. Now this hasn't officially been set by the ODE yet. Not sure exactly when they're going to do that. It's generally assumed though that it will be about where the remediation rates are right now. Based on current remediation rates, looking at the percentage of students who earn remediation-free scores from the Fordham Institute, only 36% of students will earn this pathway to graduation. Please note that is the same percentage of students who will be able to get an 18 on their end-of-course exams. This means that the vast majority of students will have to who want to graduate and get a diploma will have to take the third pathway to graduation, which is vocational. As early as their freshman year, children are going to have to go into the vocational route to be able to earn their diploma, which is where the workforce development aspect of Common Core will come into play. Now, you may be asking, why are they designing these tests to fail our kids and our teachers? It's pretty simple. Pearson gets to decide what a passing grade is, and if they make it near impossible to pass their test, they get to sell more tests. More practice tests, more makeup tests, plus they get to claim that their test is so rigorous that it must be the best. Meanwhile, there are very few in Columbus who seem to be questioning them. The parents, teachers, and even administrators are. The amount of time spent on these tests and test prep is astounding. In the Kenston district, 6th through 8th graders will spend over 13 hours testing. In high school, it'll be 25 hours plus. And that does not even take into account test prep and practice tests. Not only are these bad tests, but this testing, more so than the standardized testing of our past, has obliterated the idea of local control. Governor Kasich has said time and again that there is local control because the districts can control their curriculum. However, he seems to be the only one that doesn't understand that the tests drive what is taught in the classroom. Now, these tests were mandated on the districts were federally funded and written by a for-profit testing company without any local consideration. And this is important. Because of these facts, these tests actually violate 2 sections of the Ohio Revised Code. Now, in case you are not up on your latest copy of Ohio law, we have provided that for you in your folders and also up here on the board. Please note that it says the state board shall ensure that all assessments are created with input from Ohio parents, Ohio classroom teachers, Ohio school administrators, and other Ohio school personnel. PARCC was not created with any input from Ohio parents, Ohio classroom teachers, or other Ohio school personnel. These tests are a complete violation of Ohio law and your right as parents to have a say, even have input in what your child is being taught in the classroom. So what can you do about it? In the packet that you've received tonight, you will find an opt-out form. There are also some more opt-out forms as you leave. This form you can turn into your superintendent, informing them of your decision that your child will not be taking these tests. Please note, this is not a request. You can just inform them because it is your child. Can you opt your kids out? Absolutely. John Charlton from the Ohio Department of Education has said so. In this article from Cleveland.com, October of last year, he is quoted as saying this: Ohio does not have an official opt-out form for parents to fill out when removing children from tests, but they do have that right simply by informing the district. So what are the consequences if your student doesn't take the test? For the vast majority of students, none. The 3rd grade reading guarantee will be met this year through the OAAs in the fall or in the spring, not through the PARCC. Because these PARCC tests won't be scored until next school year almost starts, they cannot be used to hold children back from grade promotion. For this year's freshmen, in the last school board meeting, it was confirmed with the ODE legal counsel that students who choose pathways 2 or 3, vocational or the remediation-free on their college exams, may change their mind and take the PARCC exams, missed or refused, at a later date in the future. Please also pay attention to House Bill 7, which just passed the House last week unanimously and is now in the Senate. And this would clearly state that there will be no consequences to any students because of PARCC scores. Well, what will refusing the test do for your children? It will do several important things. First, it will protect your child's data and information. There is no way that the district can protect your child's information because the information goes straight to PARCC, and they do not keep it private. The second thing that this does is it sends a strong message to Columbus that we just won't accept every regulation that they give us. They will be using these tests not for any educational purposes, but to label and punish schools and teachers. Representative Tom Brinkman said last week that the more children who opt out of the PARCC test, the easier it will make our job as legislators to pass a solution and end Common Core. Please opt out today. Now, we've seen some pushback from some districts trying to tell parents that they can't opt out. A lot of that stems from the Ohio Department of Education putting pressure on the districts to not allow parents to refuse the tests. We know we're making some serious headway, though, because the ODE was forced to send out this letter last week, which I'm sure some of you have probably seen. Now, I want to walk through a couple of things within this letter and point out, first of all, what the ODE leaves out of this letter is just as important as what it put in the letter. In this first section, it says that there is no law that allows parents or students to opt out of state testing. True, but there's no law that prohibits either. We live in a free society. We do not need laws to tell us what we are allowed to do. I do not need a law to tell me that I am allowed to act in the best interest of my child. That is my right, and the Supreme Court agrees with it. 3 cases I'll provide you with here tonight. The first one is Meyer, in both Meyer and Pierce. The Supreme Court held that if the parents possess the fundamental right to direct the upbringing and education of their children. In Pierce versus the Society of the Sisters, the court declared that the child is not the mere creature of the state. Those who nurture him and direct his destiny have the right, coupled with the high duty, to recognize and prepare him for additional obligations. And in Meyer versus Nebraska, the court criticized the legislature for trying to interfere with the power of the parents to control the education of their own. Now, state tests, I want to move on to the last section of that letter from the ODE. And in this, the ODE has outlined the importance of these tests and why we have to allow our children to be subjected to these tests that are designed to fail our kids. Here's what they told us parents. We need to have our kids take these tests because we're going to use them to hold adults accountable, for district report cards, to offer funding, to let us know where we need to put more regulation, and to close schools. Where on that list was your child? The ODE didn't give you a benefit to your child. And they can't, because there is none. And it is time that we use our rights as parents to protect our kids, because Ohio's educational system seems to have forgotten about them.